Everything began in a peaceful and cozy little village. Inside one of the homes, a family waited with great anticipation to discover which class the son would be blessed with. Unlike his family, Arel did not seem nearly as excited, though the thought weighed heavily on his mind. His little sister brimmed with joy, already certain her brother would be granted the most powerful class of all. Their mother teased that if her daughter's prediction was true, Arel would likely become popular with girls. The younger sister, however, insisted that Arel was far too young to be concerned with such things, only for their father to add that at Arel's age he himself had always been surrounded by pretty girls. None of this lighthearted talk impressed the boy. He remained distant, quietly turning over in his head what the blessing of class would mean for him. In this world, every human was granted a class by the goddess upon reaching the age of 10. Along with it came the skills needed to perform that role, whether as mighty sorcerers or as simple village bakers. The long-awaited day finally arrived. Within the town's temple, the ritual of blessing began. Children stood one by one before the statue of the goddess, while a priest touched his staff to their foreheads, sensing the energy of the goddess's gift. The first child to step forward was immediately declared a blacksmith after the priest felt the power of flames and the scent of iron radiating from him. As the ceremony continued, Arel's sister swelled with pride over their family's bloodline, convinced it would secure her brother a powerful class. Finally, Arel's name was called and the crowd held its breath. He was the son of two of the village's most renowned figures, Fara, the sword princess, and Leon, the archmage. Both were revered for their advanced classes, and expectations for their child were immeasurable. Arel closed his eyes and waited, but felt nothing. The priest, too, sensed no response. Murmurs spread uneasily through the temple as the realization dawned. After further examination, the priest solemnly declared the rare conclusion: Arel was a child with no class. His sister erupted in protest, his parents fell silent with disappointment, and whispers of pity rippled through the crowd. Back home, Arel continued practicing with a sword in the yard, determined not to give in to despair. His parents attempted to console him, reminding him that they would provide for him no matter what, but Arel refused to be a burden. His little sister, puffing herself up with determination, promised to protect him as she always had. Frustrated by their pity, Arel gathered his family and declared that he did not care about being classless. Since childhood, he had trained in fencing under his mother. Even without the blessing of a class, he could still wield a sword, and he believed his efforts would one day bear fruit. Fara was moved by her son's maturity, Leon expressed faith in his future, and his sister's unwavering belief in her brother never wavered. Tired of sympathy, Arel headed to the training grounds where two boys were sparring. They showed off the natural strength that flowed effortlessly through them thanks to their classes. Recognizing Arel as the classless boy, they mocked him for daring to train. Yet Arel stood his ground and challenged them. Amused and confident, they accepted. The duel began with Arel facing one opponent, but his sharp instincts quickly turned the tide. With each block and counter, he exposed flaws in their technique. Enraged, his opponent called for help, and soon Arel fought both boys at once. Though the fight was difficult, it felt like meaningful training compared to the brutal spars he had endured under his mother's hand. He observed how poorly they coordinated, noting that those blessed with classes seemed to lack discipline and teamwork. Exploiting their carelessness, he struck down the weaker of the two and then swiftly defeated the arrogant one as well. Humiliated, the pair accused him of cheating and demanded a rematch. Before it could begin, another boy with fiery red hair intervened. He dismissed their excuses, reminding them that on a real battlefield, no one would care for complaints. The two boys quieted immediately, intimidated by him. The redhead turned to Arel, remarking that only the son of the sword princess could fight with such skill. He warned Arel not to let victory cloud his head and challenged him to a duel to prove what a true swordsman could do. The redhead introduced himself as the son of Captain Evans, the village guard's respected leader. His confidence was unshakable, rooted in both lineage and training. Unlike the earlier match, this duel was intense, balanced, and fiercely competitive. For the first time, Arel faced an opponent who forced him to adapt and push his limits. The redhead unleashed his trump card, the twin blade slash, a technique Arel could not fully block. The strike tore through his divine protection, leaving him wounded and defeated. Still, he had impressed his rival enough to earn grudging respect. Days later, Arel resumed his relentless training. Even his little sister fretted over his bruises and late nights, vowing to one day create a peaceful world for him. Fara reassured her by revealing the countless broken swords Arel had gone through, proof of his determination. Meanwhile, the boy quietly mastered the twin blade slash, having studied and endured it during his duel. One day, while training in the woods, he was ambushed by a goblin. Arel cut it down with his newly mastered technique, but soon after, a chilling roar echoed from deeper within. Fearing danger to the village, he rushed to alert the guards, only to be drawn off course by the desperate screams of a child. Following the sound, he found the redhead gravely wounded, surrounded by dead goblins. Towering over him was a hobgoblin, a monster that should never have appeared in these lands. Arel steadied himself, focused on his footing, and struck at the perfect moment with the twin blade slash, killing the beast. Seeing his rival's holy water shattered on the ground, Arel offered his own flask, saving his life. The redhead demanded to know how Arel had learned such a move, and Arel explained that he had studied it relentlessly, enduring defeat until he could make it his own. The two clashed again almost immediately, their twin blade techniques colliding in bursts of steel. Yet Arel's adaptation carried one extra slash beyond the standard form, breaking through and striking his rival. When questioned, Arel simply stated that techniques were meant to be shaped and improved for the battlefield, not followed blindly. Despite his pride, the redhead was forced to acknowledge Arel's strength. Though he had mocked the classless boy before, he now saw him as a worthy rival. Later, Fara informed her family that Evans's son had departed for Brea, the famed city of swords where she herself had once belonged to a guild. The news stirred something within Arel. Though haunted by doubt over how far a classless boy could go, he felt an unshakable pull toward that distant city. One way or another, he would find out just how far determination alone could carry him. A group of travelers arrived by carriage at Brea, a city renowned as the ideal haven for anyone who carried a sword. Excitement filled the passengers, their anticipation impossible to hide. Among them, a woman proudly revealed herself as a dual-blade swordswoman, while a young man boasted of his role as a barbarian. The two quickly fell into a heated argument. The swordswoman defended her scant attire by explaining it was necessary for agility, while the barbarian scoffed at the absurdity of such an outfit in battle. Before their quarrel could escalate further, the carriage was suddenly ambushed by a band of orcs. The driver, trying to remain composed, asked the adventurers to put their skills to use. To make matters worse, among the horde loomed an orc king, a massive beast whose presence promised a brutal fight. The barbarian knew it would take a squad to topple such a monster. The swordswoman, clutching her child, begged for his help, but he shoved her aside and refused. Just as quickly, she too abandoned the carriage and fled, leaving the others to their fate. At that moment, the last passenger, a quiet young man who had not spoken a word until then, stepped down from the vehicle. As he charged forward, his hood fell back, revealing his face. The crowd realized with shock that it was Arel. What followed was not a mere battle, but something closer to an elegant performance. His speed, his technique, and the way he weaved through the orcs resembled an artist dancing on a deadly stage. With unmatched grace, he cut down the horde. When he slipped free from a ring of dozens of orcs, the driver recognized the technique immediately. It was none other than the legendary blade dance, a skill belonging exclusively to the sword princess class, even though it was said to be possessed only by women. Arel then faced the orc king. With a blazing charge, he leaped at the towering creature, driving his blade straight through its skull as it swung at him. The beast collapsed, and with victory secured, Arel simply turned to the driver and requested that the journey continue. He was eager to reach Brea as soon as possible to continue his training and become stronger. The driver, still in awe, quietly remarked that perhaps the boy was already strong enough. One of the children from the carriage, curious about such extraordinary skill, asked what class Arel belonged to. His answer stunned everyone. He was classless. 5 years earlier, Arel had been training in his yard under the watchful eye of his mother. When he executed a technique, she was struck by how much it resembled the twin blade slash. Though unsure if it was a dream brought on by her drowsiness, she could not believe that her son, born without a class, had managed to wield such power. Arel explained calmly that he had achieved it through sheer practice and determination. He revealed his intent to master more techniques the same way and asked his mother to teach him sword princess abilities. Once he had mastered them, he vowed to travel to Brea and discover their true potential. Proud yet disbelieving, his mother smiled and admitted that despite his lack of class, her son was a prodigy. Brought back to the present, Arel's journey continued as the driver announced their arrival in Brea, the city of swords. Overwhelmed, Arel marveled at the sheer number of swordsmen gathered there, as well as the advanced classes that filled the streets. He found it curious that the driver, a mere coachman, had recognized sword techniques so easily. When asked, the man revealed he was actually a holy knight who occasionally took on carriage work to escape the exhaustion of constant fighting. The idea of living such a double life intrigued Arel, though he admitted he had never considered it. Before parting, the holy knight advised him to begin his journey by joining a guild, as battle tournaments required guild membership. Arel agreed, eager to face the strongest warriors, though warned that some guilds in Brea were far more ruthless than they'd appeared. As he wandered the bustling city, Arel encountered armored warriors recruiting for the cavalry, a noble guild of knights. Nearby, 2 women called for recruits to join the sword road, welcoming even thieves and hunters. In the midst of it all, a girl stumbled into him after failing to sneak up from behind. Acting as though she had been chasing him for ages, she shoved a contract in his face and demanded he join her guild. Arel dismissed her persistence, pointing out that such desperation meant her group was nothing more than a rookie guild starved for members. She insisted they were famous and even offered him a date with her as a reward, but he flatly refused, annoyed at her arrogance and reminded of his younger sister's behavior. When asked which guild was the most powerful, the girl admitted it was the Black Blade, renowned for boasting 8-ranked swordsmen. Without hesitation, Arel followed her directions to their mansion headquarters. At the gates, he declared his wish to join, but was directed to take the entrance exam at the reception desk. Joining the line of candidates, he eagerly awaited his turn. When asked his class, he answered truthfully. The attendant burst out laughing at the absurdity of a classless boy wanting to join one of the most prestigious guilds and dismissed him on the spot. Arel protested, insisting he could pass any trial, but the clerk coldly reminded him that rules were rules. The hall fell silent when an A-ranked swordsman entered, stealing the attention of everyone present. The candidates gazed at him in awe, yet Arel remained invisible, dismissed simply because he lacked a class. One rejection led to another, and no guild was willing to give him even the smallest chance. Remembering his mother's letter of recommendation, he considered delivering it to her old guild. Before he could act, the same girl reappeared, still desperate for him to join. This time, she went so far as to kneel before him, swearing she would even lick his boots if he accepted. Arel, unimpressed, walked away. Undeterred, she dragged him to her guild's headquarters, boasting of their grandeur. The building was indeed impressive, but its emptiness raised questions. Reluctantly, she confessed the truth. Once a mighty force, her guild had fallen into ruin, reduced to one of the weakest in Brea. Still, she swore their golden days would return under the leadership of the King of Two Swords, her father. The name caught Arel's attention. His mother had spoken of her guild's leader, the legendary King of Two Swords, who had once named the clan after his technique, Dragon Fang. Realizing this was her guild, he agreed to join. But the once great leader was now a broken figure, slouched in a chair and drowning himself in alcohol, his right arm long gone. With no hope for the future, he dismissed Arel without consideration. Saddened, his daughter admitted her father had once been among the greatest swordsmen in Brea, but after losing his arm, he had succumbed to despair. Though she believed this would deter Arel, he accepted, determined to join a guild that would take him, even if out of necessity. Elated, she presented the contract once again. He signed it. But when she read that he was classless, she assumed it was a joke until he presented an official document. Alarmed, she drew her sword and threatened him, insisting he would die if he truly stayed. Their commotion drew the attention of another woman. Lilia entered, demanding to know what was happening. The girl, named Reina, vented her frustration, lamenting that she thought she had found the perfect recruit, only to bring home a useless classless. Lilia studied the boy more carefully and suddenly recognized him. They had once trained in the same village. At first, Arel did not remember until he realized she was the daughter of Captain Evans, his red-haired childhood rival. She explained that she had grown since those days, and Reina soon recalled that her friend had once admitted she could never defeat a classless boy in their youth. Seizing the opportunity, Lilia challenged Arel to a rematch. On the training grounds, she began with the same twin-blade slash she had once used 5 years earlier. Arel countered with the same move, but her slash overpowered his and landed cleanly. Now far stronger than before, Lilia revealed her advanced might by wielding a sword 5 times heavier than normal, made possible by the brutal strength skill of her class as a mighty swordswoman. With crushing blows, she forced Arel onto the defensive. He realized her class had elevated her to an advanced swordsman, and defeat was inevitable if he continued retreating. Creating distance, he provoked her into attacking recklessly. She charged, but struck only an illusion. In truth, Arel had used the shadow technique, a supreme ability difficult even for advanced swordsmen. Appearing behind her, he landed a strike, though her divine protection and courage skill rendered his attacks ineffective. Resorting to one of his mother's teachings, he used counterattack, a sword princess technique. With precise timing, he blocked her strike and turned the momentum in his favor, ultimately defeating her. Humiliated, Lilia fled the training grounds in tears. Having proven his strength, Arel was finally accepted into the guild, with Reina pretending she had believed in him from the start. Curious about their decline, Arel learned that the guild was buried in debt. Yet Reina was determined to recover their glory through an upcoming battle tournament. They needed at least 3 participants to compete, which was why she had been so desperate to recruit him. Though Lilia was strong, she remained with the guild purely out of loyalty, as the King of Two Swords had once extended a hand when no one else would. Despite her strength, Reina admitted little confidence, as their small team would face groups of 5. Arel, however, remained unfazed, declaring this an opportunity to refine his techniques, which was the very reason he had come to Brea. Unbeknownst to them, the broken leader of Dragon Fang had been listening from behind a door. Silently, he walked away after hearing the boy's resolute words. Arel woke up the next morning remembering he was now part of his mother's former guild. When he went downstairs, he found Reiner and Lilia in the common room. Lilia greeted him warmly while Reiner stayed silent, clearly still bitter over her humiliating defeat in their duel. Lilia announced that they would be entering the upcoming guild tournament that weekend since they now met the minimum requirements. Arel didn't know much about the format, so Lilia explained it was a one-on-one elimination contest where the guild that lost all 5 of its members would be disqualified. Since they only had 3 members, teamwork would be crucial. Reiner wasn't optimistic, but Lilia assured her they wouldn't face an A-rank swordsman right away. Arel then asked about the ranking system. Lilia explained that heroes were ranked from D to A, with A rank being the strongest. Out of around 500 swordsmen in Brea, only 20 were A rank. Both she and Reiner were B rank, and since Arel had defeated Reiner, she assumed he was as well. She was confident they'd advance as long as they avoided A rank opponents. She decided to check the tournament brackets at the Coliseum to see who they'd be up against. As Reiner tried to leave, Arel asked where she was headed. She said she was going to train. Curious, he asked what skills she possessed aside from raw strength. Reiner revealed she had the gut skill, which allowed her divine protection to last longer than usual. Intrigued, Arel asked if she could strike him with her sheath sword so he could try to learn the skill indirectly. She refused, thinking he was joking, but he insisted it was for training and to build a stronger partnership. Reiner misunderstood his intentions until he explained that he believed he could learn her gut skill through repetition while his divine protection was inactive. She scolded him for being naive, reminding him that skills were divine blessings, not things one could just copy. Arel countered that he had learned Twin Blade Strike and Shadow skill without divine intervention. Though skeptical, Reiner followed him to the training grounds. She was surprised when he handled her sword with ease, even without the brute force skill. Arel explained he had built up his strength naturally through training, proving that effort could rival talent. Impressed, Reiner agreed to train him, but warned she wouldn't go easy. Just as she began striking him, Lilia suddenly ran in, panic written across her face. She revealed their first opponents were the Black Blade Guild, the strongest in the city, with 8 A-rank swordsmen. She feared their leader would send his best fighters, but insisted they'd still stand a chance if they fought smart. Noticing Arel's bruises, she assumed they had fought, though Reiner clarified it was special training. Lilia didn't believe it, joking that Reiner was just venting frustration. Reiner brushed it off and left for lunch. A few days later, the tournament day arrived. The trio made their way to the Coliseum, passing crowds who mocked their chances against Black Blade. Furious, Lilia wanted to confront them, but Reiner stalked her. He was surprised people were even betting on the matches. Lilia explained that the odds were 120 in Black Blade's favor. Practically nobody believed in their victory. But instead of being discouraged, she took it as an opportunity and admitted she'd taken another loan, betting everything on their win. Reiner was horrified, warning they'd be ruined if they lost, but Lilia shrugged it off, saying it was better to go down in glory. Their opponent's leader, Georg, approached with a mocking grin. He taunted Lilia for trying to revive her father's failed guild and mentioned he'd heard about her classless recruit. Lilia accused him of coming to gloat, but Georg claimed he was simply cheering her on, saying he had personally arranged for their guilds to face each other as a favor, giving them one last shot at glory. It was clear he wanted to crush them publicly. The Coliseum roared to life as the announcer declared the start of the tournament, Black Blade versus Dragon Fang. As the teams took their positions, Arel noticed Georg wasn't listed among the fighters. Reiner explained this meant Black Blade was taking the match seriously, sending their 5 strongest instead. The first match was announced, Eiyuu versus Arel. The crowd laughed at the sight of a classless swordsman facing an A-rank warrior. Eiyuu, insulted by the matchup, attacked immediately with Blink Dash, thrusting Arel's chest. Lilia shouted for him to be careful, but Reiner pointed out Arel was unharmed. His attacker had only struck a shadow. Eiyuu spun around, realizing he was surrounded by 3 Arels. He dismissed it as a trick, believing no one could create multiple shadow images, but the illusions attacked in unison. Before he could react, the real Arel struck him from behind, knocking him unconscious. The announcer declared Arel the winner to thunderous applause. Few could believe a classless swordsman had just defeated an A-rank. Lilia and Reiner were amazed, but Arel was more focused on analyzing Eiyuu's thrust strike technique, eager to learn it. One by one, the next opponents fell, the second to Twin Blade Strike, the third to a surprise shadow counter. Lilia cheered wildly, urging him to finish the last 2. Reiner scolded her for leaving everything to Arel, but Lilia argued he was their only real chance. Next came Shield, a heavily armored swordsman who mocked Arel for pretending to be classless. Arel ignored him and attacked, but Shield's defense was impenetrable. After several exchanges, Arel disarmed him with precision and picked up his shield. Furious, Shield lunged, but Arel parried and countered with an imitation shield bash, sending him to the ground. The crowd erupted in protest, calling Arel a fraud. To settle the dispute, the announcer revealed Arel's class status live. When the screen confirmed he was truly classless, The crowd exploded in cheers. Lilia immediately turned to Reiner, scolding her for hiding Arel's true power. If she'd known, she said, she would have taken an even bigger loan. Jokingly, she declared she would prepare a marriage certificate to tie Arel down as her gold factory. The final match was against Masamune, a mysterious samurai wielding a katana instead of a broadsword. Neither Lilia nor Reiner had ever heard of him, realizing he must be Black Blade's hidden ace. As the fight began, Arel sensed danger from Masamune's stance and stayed cautious. Masamune praised his awareness but warned him that curiosity could lead to defeat. Arel stepped forward anyway, studying his opponent's movements. When Masamune struck, Arel vanished, reappearing behind him faster than the blade could move. Shocked, Masamune barely turned before Arel finished him with Piercing Tempest, the legendary technique of the Sword Princess. The arena erupted as the announcer declared Arel the winner. Lilia and Reiner rushed to congratulate him, while Georg, watching from his shadows, clenched his fists, already plotting revenge. That evening, when they returned to the guild house, the group immediately began celebrating with drinks all around. Arel was still surprised to see that Lilia was old enough to drink, though she proudly claimed to be a grown woman. Despite her small stature, she could not believe that Arel had single-handedly defeated 5 ranked swordsmen from the most powerful guild in the country. Seeing his potential, Lilia decided she had to win his favor. She viewed him as her ticket out of poverty and obscurity. She tried to charm him, boldly offering herself to fulfill his desires. However, Arel rejected her without hesitation, remarking that he would prefer someone like Reina instead. His blunt words immediately made Reina blush. Embarrassed and defensive, she accused him of saying that only to reject Lilia's advances. Arel, however, appeared serious. He reminded her that she once accused him of calling her a man during a sword fight when they were younger. Reina had always believed she lacked womanly charms, though Arel silently disagreed, noticing otherwise. Lilia realized that Reina was completely unaware of her own allure and decided she was no threat. Confidently, Lilia leaned closer to Arel, placing her hand on his leg and suggesting that he must be tired from all the fighting, inviting him to her room. Reina quickly protested, embarrassed by Lilia's teasing, but Lilia smirked and claimed she only intended to give him a well-deserved massage. To her surprise, Arel replied that he would rather receive a massage from Reina. His version of a massage, however, involved being pummeled by Reina in the training ground as he tried to master reinforcement magic, something Reina used effortlessly thanks to her class and skill set. Lilia watched from the balcony, wondering if Arel even understood what a massage was. The ruckus eventually woke Rod, who stumbled downstairs, hungover and irritated by the noise. He complained that they did not need to vent their frustration over losing the tournament in the middle of the night. Lilia corrected him, proudly revealing that they had actually won their match against the strongest guild in the country. Rod, still groggy, assumed that the Black Blade Guild must have sent only their weaker recruits as fodder. Lilia shocked him further by explaining that all of their opponents were A-tier and Arel had defeated them entirely on his own. The revelation sobered Rod instantly. He stared at Arel, battered yet standing tall, wondering if the young man was truly that strong. Lilia then boasted that she had placed several bets on the match, and because Arel had clean swept the enemy team, she had hit the jackpot. The guild was now not only debt-free, but also had enough funds to cover its operational costs for months. Rod, however, remained skeptical. He warned that if Arel truly was that strong, larger and wealthier guilds would soon attempt to recruit him. Lilia dismissed his concern with confidence, claiming that she would soon marry Arel and secure his loyalty permanently. Arel immediately denied any such idea but turned toward Rod, saying that although Lilia was stubborn, at least she wasn't a man who had given up on everything. The remark struck a nerve. Rod glared dangerously, but Arel continued, telling him to stop wallowing in self-pity and act his age since he still had one usable hand and could wield a sword with it. He declared that a dual-wielding swordsman who could no longer dual-wield was worthless. Arel disagreed, stating that even as a classless swordsman he continued to compete and strive to rise higher. Rod shoved him away and retreated upstairs in silence. Reina and Lilia immediately rushed to Arel's side to check if he was all right. Lilia apologized for her father's behavior and thanked Arel for standing up for them. Arel simply noted that despite his injuries and retirement, Rod still possessed incredible strength and skill. It was a waste to let such potential rot away. Deep down, Arel promised himself that he would one day motivate Rod to wield his sword again. Hearing his determination, Lilia suggested that Arel train in the nearby dungeons to gain new skills. Arel was unfamiliar with the concept, so Reina explained that dungeons were underground caverns filled with monsters and traps, dangerous but excellent for gaining experience and skills. She'd also mentioned the Sword God Cup, an annual tournament that gathered the strongest swordsmen in the country to determine who was the best. Excited by the idea, Lilia presented Arel with a registration form, encouraging him to participate. To her dismay, he tore it apart, realizing it was actually a disguised marriage certificate. Lilia laughed, claiming it was only a joke, but Arel had had enough of her antics. He grabbed her in a chokehold to teach her a lesson. The next morning, Arel woke up to find Lilia attempting to assault him again. He swiftly dodged and tied her to the bed before leaving. Later that day, the group prepared to enter the dungeons. Lilia explained that each floor was accessed through teleportation circles, and that one could only teleport to floors already visited. She boasted about reaching level 12, while Reina had gone as far as level 14. Eager to face stronger enemies, Arel wanted to start from level 14, but Lilia explained it was impossible without having reached that level first. Disappointed, Arel agreed to follow her shortcut to the lower floors. Lilia, trying to isolate him, suggested that Reina stay behind, but Arel insisted that Reina accompany them. On the first floor, 2 armored knights attacked. Arel engaged one while Reina handled the other. Despite their heavy armor, the knights moved with surprising agility. Arel used his dash step technique to decapitate one, only to realize the armor was empty, animated by the dungeon's mana. The headless knight kept moving, forcing Arel to sever its legs to disable it. Reina finished her opponent as well, warning that the knights would soon regenerate. Before continuing, Arel asked about Lilia's class. She proudly declared herself a fencer and flirtatiously offered to train him in the field or in bed. Arel ignored her and moved on. Before entering the next floor, they heard cries for help. A bloodied man knelt by a door, begging for assistance, claiming his friends were trapped by a booby trap. Lilia demanded payment for their help, and to her surprise, the man handed over a sizable sum of gambling winnings. While following him, Arel noticed inconsistencies. The man's wounds were too severe for someone able to walk unaided. Realizing they were fake, Arel decided to play along to see where the deception would lead. The man led them to a hidden chamber, where a puddle of blood and a single gold coin lay in the center. Lilia, unable to resist, stepped forward to grab it. Instantly, a teleportation circle appeared beneath them. As the man smugly revealed his betrayal, he too was pulled into the spell. They found themselves on an unfamiliar floor, one even Reina had never seen, deeper than level 14. Fear overtook the trickster, who confessed that this was rumored to be the lowest floor, home to the legendary sword god. Moments later, a knight clad in rainbow-enchanted armor appeared before them. Lilia dismissed the legend as a myth, but Arel immediately recognized the danger. He shoved Lilia aside just as the sword god unleashed a slash powerful enough to shatter the dungeon walls. Arel barely blocked the next attack and was thrown into the wall, surviving only thanks to his reinforcement magic training from Reina. He countered with a flurry of strikes, but the sword god easily evaded and retaliated with a gravity spell that crushed everyone to the ground. While the others struggled, Arel remained firm. The intense gravity reminded him of the harsh training he endured as a child under his mother's guidance. This time, he stood his ground. Using the gold coin from earlier, he nullified the spell and exploited the opening to unleash his ultimate technique, Infinite Break. The sword god shattered into pieces under the blow. Afterward, Arel drank holy water to restore his strength, and the group safely escaped using the dungeon's teleportation system. Back at the tavern, Rob was drinking again when he overheard 3 adventurers bragging about tricking new members of the Dragon Fang Guild into a trap. Furious, he smashed their table and demanded answers, but was interrupted by Jor, who mocked him as a worthless drunkard. Realizing that Jor was behind the scheme, Rod broke down, believing his daughter to be dead. He lunged at Jorg in rage, but was easily overpowered and left kneeling in despair. Then a familiar voice called out from the doorway. Rod turned to see Lilia, Arel, and Reina entering the tavern, discussing how hungry they were after their ordeal. Overwhelmed with relief, Rod embraced his daughter, thanking the gods for her safety. Reina confronted Jorg, revealing that his underling had confessed everything, but Jorg arrogantly denied any involvement, claiming that adventurers were responsible for their own survival. Arel admitted that Jorg technically had a point, though Rod swore he would make him pay. Jorg mocked him once more, calling him a washed-up drunk, and left the tavern. Arel quietly wondered what new challenges awaited them next, but for now, their adventure had only just begun. A few days passed, and Lilia received a scroll containing all the preliminary brackets for the tournament. To her horror, she discovered that she was in the same bracket as Arel. The realization crushed her spirits completely. She knew she had no chance of winning the preliminaries or representing her guild in the main tournament. Arel, unfamiliar with the concept of preliminaries, learned from Reina that the Sword God tournament drew an overwhelming number of aspiring swordsmen, making it impossible to take everyone into the main event. To manage the influx, the city organized preliminaries divided into brackets determined entirely by a dice roll. It was pure luck who faced whom, and the winner of each bracket would secure a direct entry to the main tournament. When Arel checked the scroll that Reina was reading, he noticed she was in a different group. Relieved, she silently thanked the gods that she wouldn't have to face Arel. Despite her relief, she prayed for help to pass through the prelims safely. Arel, however, seemed amused by her attitude, and as they bantered, Lilia interrupted them, reminding the group that they needed to return to the dungeons for more training. Arel, bored of the repetitive dungeon battles, wanted to skip the session. Lilia tried to persuade him by acting cute, insisting she needed a strong man to defend her if things went south. Reina found her behavior pitiful and resolved to teach her something about independence. Before they could leave, Rod entered the room dramatically, grabbing his daughter and warning her to stay safe, worried that Jord might strike again. Seeing the fear in her father's eyes, Lilia solemnly agreed to be careful before departing. As Rod turned around, he found Arel silently observing him. Rod defended his overprotective behavior, saying he still had time to be a better father. Arel simply smiled, remarking that it was never too late to be a good person before leaving. Weeks passed, and the day of the preliminaries finally arrived. The matches began as the crowd erupted in cheers, the clang of steel and bursts of sparks filling the arena. One by one, contestants were eliminated until the group had thinned considerably. Lilia, unfortunately, lost her match before even facing Arel. Sitting in the corner, she brooded over her defeat, disappointed that she hadn't made it to the finals. Arel, indifferent to her feelings, noted that her fears about being in the same bracket as him were unfounded, since she would have lost anyway. His remark only deepened her frustration, but she pulled herself together and urged him to remain cautious, warning that the other finalists had a few tricks up her sleeve. Arel, unconcerned, claimed that he had already faced every kind of trick imaginable in the dungeons. Lilia, however, was skeptical, explaining that his next opponent, a red-haired swordswoman, was a magic swordsman capable of channeling mana into her sword for enhanced attacks. The revelation intrigued Arel, as he hadn't expected magic to be permitted in a tournament meant to determine the best swordsman. Lilia clarified that one only needed to belong to a guild to qualify, regardless of class. Soon the announcer called for Arel's match. Lilia wished him luck as he stepped into the arena, coming face-to-face with his red-haired opponent. She confidently revealed her abilities as a magic swordsman and made it clear she wouldn't tolerate complaints about fairness. Arel remained composed, ready to prove that only skill determined victory. As the match began, the red-haired girl immediately launched a barrage of fireballs. Arel dodged and deflected them with remarkable precision, moving fluidly through the fiery onslaught. The girl's mana reserves seemed endless as she continued her assault, but Arel closed the distance, striking swiftly. She blocked his attack and countered with another explosion of flames that forced him back. Analyzing her movements, Arel recognized her potential, acknowledging how effectively she could transition between long-range and close combat. She boasted about her power, belittling him for being classless, but her arrogance only revealed her lack of true mastery. When she infused her sword with fire, transforming it into a flaming blade, her strikes grew erratic and unpredictable. Arel skillfully deflected each one, his precision unmoving even as the flames danced dangerously around him. Her frustration peaked when Arel began countering effortlessly without stepping back. He demonstrated what true mastery looked like, noting that while her basic swordsmanship was superior to Lilia's, she lacked refinement and focus. Enraged, she charged recklessly, giving Arel the opening he needed. With a swift twin slash, he extinguished her flames completely. Before she could recover, he blinked behind her and struck the back of her head with his sword's pommel, knocking her out cold. The audience erupted in cheers as the judges declared Arel the winner of the fourth bracket. While the crowd celebrated, Arel's mind was elsewhere, analyzing her techniques and thinking of ways to master similar skills. Days later, the final tournament day arrived. Lilia returned to the guild to wake her father, insisting that he come with her to cheer for both Arel and Reina, who had won their respective brackets. Rod, uninterested, refused to move, claiming he didn't care about the event. Lilia teased him about being afraid of seeing Jorg, provoking an irritated denial. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Rod confessed that he had tried picking up his sword the day before and realized how rusty he had become. His admission infuriated Lilia, who reminded him that many lifelong swordsmen couldn't even qualify for the preliminaries, while he, even with one arm, could still contend with fighters in the finals. Her words reignited something within him, and he finally agreed to accompany her. On the way to the arena, Rod reminisced about the old days when he trained Reina, back when he still had both arms. The memories filled him with warmth and pride. Inside the tournament grounds, Reina was visibly nervous, shaking her legs as she awaited her match. Arel appeared beside her, startling her out of her anxious trance. His calm demeanor reminded her to focus as the announcer declared the first match: Jorg, the defending champion, versus Arel, the classless swordsman who had shocked everyone with his undefeated run. As Arel entered the arena, Lilia cheered from the stands, shouting for him to defeat Jorg. But when Jorg appeared, Arel immediately sensed something was off. Jorg's eyes glowed purple, fangs protruded from his mouth, and a dark horn emerged from his head. Rod recognized the danger at once. The sword Jorg wielded contained a powerful demon. The truth became apparent when Jorg's voice changed, revealing that he was no longer in control. A demon within introduced itself as Durgelda, the destroyer of mankind, the same being once defeated and sealed by the original sword god. The cursed sword, long thought to be hidden in the royal repository, had somehow resurfaced, and Jorg's greed had unleashed it once more. Panic spread among the crowd as Durgelda erected a massive dome of magical energy, trapping everyone inside the arena. He relished the chaos, claiming that the screams of mortals were music to his ears. Arel, however, remained motionless, sword in hand, unshaken by the fear around him. The demon mocked him for his courage, but Arel prepared for battle, determined to prove that Durgelda could be defeated again. When their blades clashed, Arel's movement stunned everyone. He was using the Divine Step technique, one reserved for sword gods. Durgelda grew wary, realizing that the boy's style mirrored the one that had once sealed him away. Despite Arel's skill, the demon possessed Jorg's body, granting immense durability. Durgelda retaliated, slamming Arel to the ground with a crushing blow. But when the dust settled, Arel rose again, his body barely scratched thanks to the resilience he developed through his training with Reina. Renewed, he unleashed a relentless flurry of strikes, his infinite break technique, battering the demon from every angle. Durgelda faltered, haunted by memories of his defeat at the hands of a sword god. The barrage culminated in a devastating slash that sent Jorg crashing to the ground. The crowd erupted, believing the threat was over. However, the true danger remained. The demon's soul still resided within the cursed sword. Seeking a new host, it leaped toward Rod. Arel reacted instantly, pushing Reina away as Rod shielded his daughter. When the dust cleared, Rod stood holding the demon blade, its edge pressed against Lilia's throat. Arel realized his mistake too late. He should have destroyed the sword itself. Durgelda tried to use Rod's body to kill Lilia, but the hand holding the blade refused to move. Rod's willpower was too strong. Struggling against the possession, Rod slammed the sword into the ground, breaking Durgelda's control. With one final effort, he hurled the sword toward Arel. Arel caught it mid-air and with a single decisive strike, shattered the cursed blade into fragments, destroying Durgelda once and for all. The arena fell silent for a moment before erupting into thunderous applause. The demon was gone, the people were safe, and Arel stood victorious once again. At the guild, Rod had rediscovered his long-lost passion for swordsmanship. Ever since Arel won the Sword God Cup, crowds of new recruits had poured in, hoping to learn from the same place that produced the new champion. Rod pushed them harder than ever, demanding precise technique and flawless defense. The trainees groaned and stumbled through the grueling drills, some trying to sneak away when exhaustion overtook them. One trainee attempted to hide behind a wall, but Lilia, Rod's daughter, caught him. When he complained that Rod was being too intense, she only smiled and said her father had been like this ever since meeting Arel. The trainee wondered where their hero had gone. Lilia revealed softly that Arel had left the guild, and that Reina, his closest companion, had followed him. As she spoke, her voice trembled and tears formed as she realized he had gone without saying goodbye. Far from the guild's noise, Arel rode in a carriage through rolling countryside. The driver couldn't hide his shock that the reigning Sword God Cup champion was leaving the city just when fame had found him. Arel only said he had learned what he came to learn. There was one opponent left he needed to face, the one who had always stood above him, his mother. Back in his quiet hometown, Fara was picking wildflowers when she sensed someone nearby. Arel crept forward, trying to surprise her, but she greeted him calmly, having felt his presence at the last moment. It was proof he had grown stronger. When he told her he had become the new Sword God Cup champion, she smiled proudly. She too had once held that title. Before Arel could issue his challenge, Fara vanished in a blur and reappeared before him, her speed inhuman. Even without a weapon, her movement sent a chill down his spine. She agreed to a spar at their old mountain training ground, her eyes gleaming with excitement. At the summit, the clash began. Fara lunged first, divine step flashing beneath her feet. Arel parried, chaining his divine slashes into a fluid twin-blade strike. Sparks showered between them as she countered effortlessly, impressed by how refined his technique had become. When Arel asked how she blocked him so easily, Fara revealed she wasn't using any sword skills at all, only pure, instinctive swordsmanship. Their battle escalated, steel ringing like thunder. Trees splintered under the force of their blows, and even the mountain itself seemed to tremble. When Fara tried to suppress Arel with divine pressure, he matched her force, mastering the same art she had once used to overwhelm him. Finally, both unleashed their ultimate techniques, infinite break colliding in an explosion of light and sound that echoed across the valley. The villagers panicked at the distant booms, and at that same moment, Reina arrived in town. She ignored the chaos and hurried straight to Arel's home. There she met Mira, his short-tempered sister, who mistook her for a rival and nearly slammed the door in her face. Reina insisted she only wanted to see Arel, Their argument ended abruptly when Arel and Fara returned, both bruised yet smiling. Mira demanded to know who had won their duel. Fara proudly declared her son victorious, which left Rihanna astonished. Defeating a sword deity was no small feat. Arel brushed off the praise, saying it hardly counted since his mother hadn't trained seriously in years. Fara teased him in return, and laughter filled the air, softening the tension of their reunion. That evening, they gathered for dinner. Fara asked eagerly about Arel's life in the Sword City and especially about Rihanna. When Arel mentioned that they had lived together during their guild days, Fara's teasing grew even bolder while Rihanna flusteredly clarified that they were only guildmates. When she asked why Arel had left the city without warning, he explained that his journey there was complete. What surprised him was how much his sudden departure had hurt her. Fara smiled quietly, pleased that her son had found a friend who cared deeply for him. And Rihanna made a bold request. She bowed before Fara and asked to become her disciple. Before Fara could respond, Evans, Rihanna's father, burst into the house in panic, shouting about monstrous sounds from the mountains. Fara and Arel exchanged guilty glances but pretended ignorance. Fara calmly reassured him that the monster had already been defeated. Only then did Evans notice his daughter. Overcome with emotion, he'd assumed she had returned home to marry. Fara mischievously played along, telling him that Rihanna wished to learn how to become a good wife for Arel. Rihanna's face turned crimson as she tried to explain, but Evans took every word as truth and happily entrusted his daughter to Fara's care before departing in tears of joy. Later that night, Leon, Arel's father, remained absorbed in his magical research when Arel entered his study. Without even looking up, Leon greeted him, having already heard the commotion. When Arel mentioned defeating Fara, Leon smirked knowingly before teasing him about bringing home a beautiful girl. Arel didn't deny it, describing Rihanna as more gorgeous than cute. Then he spoke of his new goal to master magic. Leon warned that it was impossible. Arel's body lacked the mana capacity required for spellcraft, but his son refused to accept that. In the kitchen, Fara began teaching Rihanna domestic skills. The young swordswoman tried her best, but the result was disastrous. Fara laughed heartily, promising to start from the basics next time. Later, Arel helped Leon repair the damage. When Arel asked why his father hadn't simply used magic to fix it, Leon explained that Fara preferred handcraft over spells. Then, to demonstrate, he repaired a broken mug with a single gesture, like mewing the fragments back together. Arel stared in awe. Leon told him not to expect the same. A swordsman without a class was already a miracle, but magic was different. It required innate energy that couldn't be trained from nothing. Arel countered that he might possess a small amount of mana. Leon dismissed the idea, saying if that were true, he would have triggered magic by accident at some point in his life. But Arel remembered something. Months earlier, during guild training, he had drunk several mysterious potions after the holy water supply ran out. Lilia had warned him not to, fearing they were poisonous, but Arel drank them anyway, believing even poison could strengthen resistance. They hadn't harmed him, but something within him had changed afterward. Intrigued, Leon instructed him to focus that energy into his palm. Arel closed his eyes and concentrated. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a faint blue glow flickered to life. Leon's eyes widened. It was weak, but undeniable. His son had mana. The light faded quickly, leaving Arel breathless. Leon told him to rest and practice expanding his reserves. The next morning, Arel strode into the item shop and purchased every mana potion in stock, dropping gold coins onto the counter without hesitation. From that day forward, he trained obsessively, draining his mana, restoring it, and repeating the process until exhaustion claimed him. Months passed, seasons changed, and one evening under the same mountain that once echoed with swords, Arel finally succeeded. Leon watched, astonished. His son's mana output was still low. No stronger than that of a novice mage, but it was real. He handed Arel a parchment filled with Magiscript, the written language of magic, explaining that without natural talent, he would need to study every spell manually, one symbol at a time. Even so, Leon couldn't hide his pride. His son had already shattered the boundaries of what a classless swordsman could achieve. Now he was defying the limits of magic itself. Before long, Leon said Arel should travel to the city of magic where scholars could teach him properly. 3 years had passed since Raynor began her training at Arel's house. One quiet afternoon, she brewed tea and served it to Arel's mother, who took a gentle sip while Raynor watched nervously. When the older woman smiled and said the tea was delicious, Raynor's tension melted into relief. Gratitude welled in her chest. She silently thanked her teacher for everything she had learned. Their peaceful moment shattered when Mira burst into the room, tears streaming down her face. Between sobs, she said she had gone to wake Arel but found only a note in his room. Raynor took the paper, her expression tightening as she read the words. Arel had left for the city of magic. Mira wailed in heartbreak, unable to believe her brother had gone without saying goodbye. Arel's mother gently embraced her, saying that while she understood his excitement, He should have at least told them before leaving. Rainer stood silently by, recalling how she had once disappeared without warning too. Only now did she truly grasp the pain she must have caused others. Arel's mother sighed softly, remarking that both her eldest daughter and son were far too free-spirited, and wondered aloud where they had inherited that trait from. Moments later, Arel's father appeared, still half asleep, completely unaware of the emotional storm unfolding before him. Meanwhile, Arel was already traveling toward the City of Magic in a carriage shared with 3 other students. Curious, he asked the driver how long the journey would take. The man replied that it would be about 2 days, adding with a chuckle that Arel had changed a lot since his days in the City of Swords. After returning home for 3 years, he was once again setting off to chase a new dream. Among the passengers was a red-haired boy named Kato, who leaned forward and asked if Arel was headed to the Institute of Magic as well. When Arel nodded, Kato commented that he looked older than most new students. It was rare for someone to enroll so late. His teasing earned him a scolding from the blue-haired girl, Kufa, who told him not to mock others. Kato shot back that she was being even ruder, and soon the two were loudly bickering. The green-haired girl, Colette, tried to calm them down, but Kato snapped at her too. Arel simply observed the chaos in silence, guessing that all 3 had only recently received their magical blessings. Trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, Kato asked Arel what kind of magic he used, proudly stating that his own specialty was red magic. Arel recalled how his father once explained that there were 6 branches of magic, and each person's affinity was different. But in his case, he had none. No class, no alignment. He had to experiment with all of them. When he told Kato this, the boy laughed, thinking it was a joke. Kufa chuckled too, saying that no one without a class could enter the institute. Without a word, Arel showed his class ID. The laughter died instantly. The 3 stared in disbelief. Kato forced a smirk and called him crazy for trying to learn magic without a class. Arel only looked out the window, a faint sense of deja vu stirring. He had heard those words before long ago. A sudden roar echoed through the forest. The carriage jolted to a stop as the horses screamed in terror. Everyone froze as another roar shook the air. Arel's eyes sharpened. He recognized it as the cry of a male troll king. He urged the driver to move, but the man trembled and said the horses had fainted from fear. Colette broke down in panic, convinced they were doomed. Kufa, staying calm, reasoned that even a king was still just a troll. Kato agreed confidently, saying that trolls were big but slow and that together they could handle it. But before anyone could act, heavy footsteps thundered through the trees. A massive troll emerged, only to be crushed aside by an even larger one. The Troll King itself had appeared, its shadow swallowing the carriage whole. Kato, shaking yet stubborn, jumped out and hurled a massive fireball with all his mana. The spell barely singed the creature. The troll roared and charged. Kato froze, drained, and helpless, until an explosion of fire erupted from the side, engulfing the monster in an inferno so powerful it turned to ash instantly. The forest fell silent. Everyone stared in awe. Arel exhaled softly, muttering that he should have held back. Kato turned to him, eyes wide with disbelief. The others realized it was Arel who had unleashed the supreme-level red magic spell. Colette gasped. It was a technique only high-ranking mages could perform. Without hesitation, Arel used healing magic to revive the horses. The driver, trembling, thanked him over and over, calling him a miracle worker. Kato knelt before Arel, apologizing for his earlier arrogance and declaring him a great master. Arel denied it, but Kato refused to stop, swearing he would become as strong as his teacher. When Arel once again showed his class ID, insisting he truly was classless, Kufa and Colette refused to believe it. The driver finally urged everyone back onto the carriage. 2 days later, the group arrived at the City of Magic, Arsbel, a grand city built in the center of a vast lake. The carriage stopped at the bridge leading in. Kufa and Colette exchanged amused glances, whispering that Kato, usually so arrogant, had suddenly turned humble around Arel. They joked that Arel must have cast a charm spell on him, deciding to keep their distance and watch him for now. As they crossed into the city, Kato asked if Arel planned to take the entrance exam for red magic. Only then did Arel realize that the institute was divided into 6 schools: red, blue, green, yellow, white, and black. Kato explained that each used its own magiscript, grammar, and casting system. Kufa and Colette revealed that they belonged to the blue and green schools respectively. Kato teased them not to fail and get sent back to the countryside, earning himself an irritated glare from Kufa. Arel stayed quiet, praying he wouldn't face rejection again like he had in the City of Swords. At the red school, Kato showed Arel where to register. Arel hesitated, unsure if being classless would disqualify him. But the receptionist simply stamped his form and handed him the examinee note, 12, explaining that anyone had the right to take the exam regardless of class. Arel smiled faintly. This city truly was different. At the testing grounds, a young student launched a small fireball and passed. Then came examining No. 11, a blonde-haired boy brimming with confidence who mocked the others for their weak spells. The instructor announced that he was already an advanced class mage, a rare gift for his age. Arel quietly asked Kato if that was impressive. Kato whispered that prodigies like that were destined for the elite course. The blonde boy requested to demonstrate an eruption spell and summoned a blazing pillar of fire that drew loud applause. Kato proudly bragged that his master Arel could do even better, earning himself a flick to the forehead. When the boy boasted that his fire could melt metal, Arel pointed out that the dummy had melted at all. The instructor explained that it was made of mithril, a heat-resistant alloy forged by the Yellow School. When Arel's turn came, he cast Eruption. At first it looked weaker, the flames small and contained. Then the mithril dummy began to glow, warp, and finally melt into liquid. Gasps erupted across the arena. The blonde boy accused Arel of cheating, but Arel calmly explained that he had compressed the spell's ignition time to multiply its intensity. The prodigy was left speechless as Kato shouted praises, calling Arel the strongest mage he'd ever seen. Arel moved on to the blue school where he found Kufa completing her exam. Her water spell struck the target perfectly, earning her a pass. When Arel's turn came, he unleashed multiple ice-edge spells that shattered the mithril dummy into shards. The crowd could only watch in stunned silence as he walked away. At the green school, Arel found Colette trembling at the entrance. She admitted she hadn't registered yet because of fear. She always froze under pressure. Arel listened quietly, then told her that mistakes didn't define a person's future. Everyone failed sometimes. The key was to keep moving forward. His calm words eased her nerves. She smiled faintly, thanked him, and promised to try. Later, Arel's tornado spell tore through the windmill used for testing, destroying it entirely. The startled instructor still passed him on the spot. Inspired, Colette followed and succeeded perfectly, recalling Arel's advice. Arel went on to the yellow and white schools, passing both exams without difficulty. Only the black school remained. The black school looked old and nearly deserted. As Arel wandered through its dusty halls, he heard strange noises from a nearby crate. A woman ran up in a panic, asking if he'd seen her pet Gooey. Arel pointed toward the crate, which she opened to reveal a tiny green chimera, her own creation. She squealed with joy and hugged it tight. Then, a skeleton approached Arel from behind, resting a bony hand on his shoulder and greeting him cheerfully. Instinctively, Arel drew his sword and sliced its head off, only for the skeleton to calmly pick it back up. It introduced itself as Latalia, the beautiful office clerk of the Black School. When Arel asked about the entrance exam, she laughed, explaining that so few people studied black magic that anyone who came was accepted automatically. Arel simply nodded in understanding. Later, as he crossed the courtyard, familiar voices called out. Kato, Kufa, and Colette came running toward him, saying they had searched everywhere. Each eagerly asked which school he planned to join, insisting he choose theirs. To their shock, Arel smiled faintly and said he wouldn't choose just one. He intended to attend all 6 schools of magic at once. His friends stared at Arel in disbelief, completely shocked by his decision. Arel showed off his acceptance IDs from the 6 different schools he got into, a feat Kufa could hardly believe. She wondered how the schools hadn't discovered his multiple admissions, but Arel explained that student information was not shared between institutions. After reviewing all 6 academic schedules, he confidently believed he could attend them all through improvisation. His plan immediately hit a snag when he saw the course schedules overlapped. Kato reminded him that he had warned against applying to 6 schools at once. Arel countered that attendance was only 20% of the passing grade. Since exams determined the majority, he was certain he would succeed with high scores. Colette pointed out that high exam scores were unlikely without attending classes, as crucial recent information was not in the textbooks. Arel asked to borrow their notes, a solution they agreed to. Kufa then questioned how he would manage the other 3 schools where he couldn't borrow notes. Arel clarified that the School of Black Magic was self-study with no classes, leaving him only the yellow and white schools to manage. Kato was impressed, and they agreed to attend the Red Magic School together for their first day. Kufa privately asked Colette how Arel planned to manage 2 schools, noting that mastering even one was nearly impossible. Colette simply said Arel was mysterious and unlike the average person. Kato, eager for his first day, rushed to find his seat, but Arel directed him toward the back. Before they could sit, Royce spotted and instantly recognized them. They ignored him and walked past, infuriating Royce, who screamed at them. Kaito finally recognized Royce as the sore loser from the exams, but Royce denied losing and accused Arel of being a fraud, asserting no mage of his rank could lose to a mere spellcaster. Arel revealed he wasn't a spellcaster. Royce, now understanding his loss, assumed Arel was a high-ranking mage and commended his youth and skill. Arel denied being a mage, sending Royce into a panic, believing Arel must be a supreme class archmage. Arel denied that too, leaving Royce utterly bewildered. Tutor Bakshis entered and asked them to settle down. Royce immediately raised his hand, introduced himself, and asked Tutor Bakshis what class Arel was in, noting Arel was the only other student to use eruption at the exam. Tutor Bakshis revealed Arel was classless, a fact Arel confirmed, but Royce was too stunned to comprehend it. Tutor Bakshis announced the start of the lesson, instructing them to open their books as he scribbled manuscripts on the board. Kato struggled immensely, finding the multitude of manuscripts combined with complex spelling and vocabulary overwhelming. Arel, however, was surprised at the basic curriculum, questioning why they started from scratch when spellcasters already had manuscripts engraved in their minds. Tutor Bakshis explained that many students still hadn't fully memorized the grammar. He clarified that while natural skill allowed them to use magic, complete knowledge of manuscripts was necessary for smoother spellcasting, efficient mana management, and reduced physical strain. Arel finally understood the emphasis. Tutor Bakshis added that at higher levels, this knowledge allowed them to rearrange spells for complex magic. Kato wondered if Arel had done this during the exam, and Arel admitted he hadn't known it was advanced, explaining his father always mixed spells casually. After class, Arel went to the Green School of Magic to meet Colette. He found the Red School classes uninteresting, but the Green School was captivating, especially the upcoming practical training for flight magic, a skill he admitted he had never practiced. Colette was surprised, asking how he mastered advanced magic yet lacked a basic skill like flying. Arel blamed his father's extreme fear of heights for never teaching him. The tutor entered and instructed them to spread out. She demonstrated flight magic, telling them to imagine being swept up by air currents, suggesting they spread their hands like a bird. Arel realized the visualization technique required the user to have the spell already in mind, a spell he didn't know. Colette began levitating beside him, overjoyed at her success, but lost her balance and crashed. Students laughed, but Colette quickly recovered, declaring she was no longer afraid of screwing up, and resumed practicing. Arel was impressed by Colette's quick mastery, certain she would fully learn to fly, which motivated him. He figured the only way for him to replicate the tutor's instruction was to cast a tornado spell at his feet. The spell launched him, but the upward force failed and Arel hit the ground hard. Colette helped him up. Another student approached, mocked their sight, and showed off his perfect flying technique. He boasted he had studied flight magic since becoming a spellcaster and had never lost a race. Arel didn't know what a race was. Colette explained it was a flight magic sport where competitors raced around a course. Arel immediately agreed to participate, but the student advised him to learn how to fly first. Arel boasted he would master it quickly. The student asked the tutor the date of the next race, which was in 2 months. The student advised Arel to forget the next race as flying took at least 6 months to master and challenged him to race next year before flying off. Arel, however, already had an idea for a spell combination to replicate flying and revealed to Colette he would participate in the race in 2 months. Days later, Colette, Kufa, and Kato walked through the Green Magic School corridors at night. Kato questioned why Colette dragged them out when they should be sleeping. She explained she forgot something and brought them along so she wouldn't get lost. Kato accepted the reason but noted Kufa could have been enough protection. Colette revealed Kufa insisted on bringing Kato for extra defense. Kufa explained they needed to be a large group because of rumors about ghosts on school grounds after dark. Kato panicked, and Kufa mocked him as the scared little boy who needed help entering the bathroom. Kato condemned her for bringing up his past, calling her a hypocrite for hiding behind Colette. Kufa denied hiding, claiming she was guarding Colette's back. As they quarreled, Colette urged them to be quiet, fearing they would attract the ghost. They turned and saw the ghost appear through the window behind Colette. They screamed a warning, but the ghost opened the window and covered Colette's mouth before she could scream. Kato threatened to burn it, but it released her and calmed them. Kato recognized the voice. Arel took off his hood, revealing his face, and asked what they were doing there. He explained he had been practicing his flight magic around the school to train for the race. Kufa realized he was the source of the ghost rumors. Kato worried Arel was exhausting himself, but Arel assured him he got enough rest, saying he had trained himself to practice while sleeping. Kufa insisted that it wasn't restful. Kato vowed to start practicing on his own, though he knew he wouldn't reach Arel's level. Arel advised him to lose his fear of ghosts first, which Kato denied having. Kufa and Colette silently promised to practice spellcasting to improve themselves. They said their goodbyes, and Arel, wide awake, decided what to do next. He visited Latalia and asked permission to enter the library. She asked what book he needed and revealed he was reading every book he didn't own at home for useful information. Latalia offered him a job at the library because he was unique in not getting sick from seeing the black magic books. The next day at the Red Magic School, Arel pointed out a mistake Tutor Bakshis made on a spell line written on the board. Kaito praised him. Arel explained he had to memorize all spells since they didn't come naturally, and he did so by creating shorthand versions. He declared he could shorten the tutor's spell lines by 1/3. Tutor Bakshis invited him to the board. Tutor Bakshis analyzed the spell, admitted it was theoretically accurate, but noted the lack of safeguards, meaning it would explode if it failed. Arel said he didn't need safeguards because of his divine protection. Tutor Bakshis insisted the protection wouldn't stop the pain, but Arel insisted he could handle the pain as long as he didn't die. Tutor Bakshis, realizing Arel's complete mastery, offered him a promotional exam to the 2nd grade. Royce demanded to take the test as well, and Tutor Bakshis agreed. Tutor Bakshis led them to an arena and announced the start of the exam. Arel asked what to do. Tutor Bakshis explained that once they entered their lane, a gate would open, releasing a monster. They had to defeat it from a distance with magic, warning the monsters would attack if approached. Royce volunteered to go first. In the lane, a Minotaur emerged and charged. Royce used Eruption, but the Minotaur was too fast. Arel noted the spell was stronger than before, which Tutor Bakshis confirmed was from classwork. Royce cast Eruption multiple times but failed to connect. Tutor Bakshis pointed out Eruption was poor against a moving target, especially with Royce panicking. The Minotaur reached Royce and swung its arm before suddenly disappearing. Royce was relieved, and Tutor Bakshis assured him the school protected its students. Royce was informed he failed but was commended for attempting a test usually taken after 2 years of study. Royce realized he needed to study more humbly and promised to achieve his goal. Tutor Bakshis then ordered Arel into his lane, assuring him the same species of monster was prepared. A monster emerged that was larger and darker than the previous one. The caretaker rushed to inform Tutor Bakshis that a superior Minotaur had been mistakenly mixed into the course. The superior Minotaur charged. Arel tried 2 fire spears to immobilize it, but it easily jumped over them. Tutor Bakshis, fearing the monster would break the barrier, advised Arel to leave, but Arel refused, confident he could win. His fire spears curved back and struck the Minotaur from behind, immobilizing it. Tutor Bakshis realized Arel gave the spears a homing effect. Arel used Eruption to defeat the Minotaur. Tutor Bakshis announced he passed and invited him to the 2nd grade class the next day. Kaito spread the news to Kufa and Colette, but Arel was not satisfied. He wanted to take and ace the promotion exams at his other schools too. The next morning, Arel wasted no time tracking down the blue class instructor, Hengel, and asked her to let him take a promotion exam immediately. Hengel, unsure whether he had the ability, explained that promotions were held only once a year, and if he wished, he could test himself then. But Arel insisted she not dismiss him that easily. He brought up the teacher's recommendation system, noting that if she recommended him, he could take the exam right away. Hengel acknowledged that such a rule existed but stressed it was for extraordinary students, prodigies who were 1 in a million. Arel countered by urging her to at least observe his magic once. Hengel sighed and told him she would consider it if he began attending classes consistently. Arel made a face, claiming that attending classes was the worst thing for him right now. This infuriated Hengel, who demanded to know if he considered her class pointless. Arel replied that her lessons were useful for beginners, but for him, they were repetitive and limiting. Triggered by his attitude, Hengel declared that she would personally decide whether his magic was basic or not. Arel smiled internally. His plan to bait her had succeeded. If he won the mock battle, he'd immediately gain the chance to take the exam. Hengel escorted Arel to the academy's arena. Kufa watched from above, confused why Arel would provoke Hengel, who was just 1 step away from becoming an archmage, a position few ever achieved. Arel, however, remained relaxed as he stepped confidently into the arena. Hengel explained the rules: no physical attacks, only magic. If Arel won, she would let him take the promotion exam. Arel nodded calmly, claiming he believed he had a good chance of victory. The arrogance irritated Hengel further. She wondered how anyone could be this overconfident against someone of her skill level. At the start of the battle, Hengel immediately unleashed a devastating ice storm. The frigid vortex swirled violently around Arel, so cold that even Kufa struggled to breathe while watching. When the storm died down, Arel had been frozen solid in a block of ice. Hengel smirked, convinced he had been all talk. She turned toward Kufa and lectured her that in a mock battle, starting with a strong spell was the smartest way to end things quickly. But before she could finish celebrating, cracks appeared through the ice. Arel punched his way out. He had cast several layers of ice shields around himself during the attack, reducing the storm's impact. Hengel admitted he was quick with his spell work but insisted it wouldn't be enough to defeat her. Arel produced a volley of ice shards. Hengel scoffed. Ice shards were the most basic spell a beginner learned. But Kufa noticed something alarming. Arel kept multiplying the shards, doubling their number effortlessly, whereas she herself could only produce 2 at most. Hengel complimented his quantity but dismissed their strength as insufficient. She matched his attack with her own ice shards. The spells collided midair, exploding. Realizing he had underestimated her, Arel prepared another volley and doubled it again. Hangul laughed, matching him shard for shard, reminding him she could produce hundreds anytime she wished. But Arel wasn't done. He suddenly generated 100 ice shards not only in front of Hangul but to her sides and behind her, surrounding her fully. This finally caught her off guard. Multiplying shards was easy. Changing their positions required complex spell manipulation. She quickly threw up an ice wall, knowing her shards couldn't protect her from a barrage from all directions. Hangul then switched strategies. She conserved her mana, planning to wait until Arel exhausted himself. She believed he could not break through her fortified ice wall anyway. But Arel had anticipated exactly this. Since she trapped herself inside her own defenses, he prepared his trump card. High above her, he created a massive ice spear and launched it downward. Hangul panicked and activated her ice shield, but it wasn't strong enough. The spear tore through it and struck her. Arel let out a relieved sigh, admitting that defeating her was far tougher than he expected. Kufa, stunned, realized she had just witnessed a student defeat a teacher, something nearly unheard of in the academy. Later, Arel met Kufa, Kaido, and Colette outside the arena. Kufa explained that Hangul had agreed to promote him immediately without requiring the exam. Kaido celebrated his success, but Arel was already thinking ahead. His next target was the Green School. Colette escorted him to the Green School instructor. Arel asked to take their promotion exam as well. The teacher refused, explaining that their school strictly followed the scheduled exam dates. Arel insisted again, offering to demonstrate his magic, but the teacher firmly declined. Their rules, she said, differed from the Blue School. No student could skip the schedule. Frustrated, Arel asked whether there had to be a way to test early. Snapping under pressure, the green instructor blurted out that only the headmaster could authorize such a request. Arel considered approaching them, but she warned him not to even think about it. The headmaster was extremely busy, and disturbing them without reason could lead to expulsion. At that moment, Khalid stepped in with another option. The annual flight race was coming soon. The winner was personally awarded by the headmaster every year. If Arel won, he'd meet the headmaster directly. Excited, Arel said this sounded perfect. But the green teacher smirked, reminding him there were more than 300 participants. It wouldn't be easy. Arel declared he would win regardless. Race day finally arrived. Hundreds of participants lined up as the commentator introduced the headmaster, who wished everyone a clean, safe race. Before the start, a green-haired student approached Arel, asking mockingly if he was there to embarrass himself. Arel didn't even recognize him. Furious, the boy introduced himself as Skyke, the future fastest mage in the world. The race began with chaos. Many participants collided midair or lost control and fell off the course. One mage blasted forward like a rocket but couldn't steer and crashed into the wall. Soon, only 15 participants, the top flyers, remained in the lead. Among them were two surprising faces, Arel and Skyke, both first years. Skyke was shocked that Arel kept up. Arel simply commented that everyone was moving slowly because the race was long and going full speed early would only exhaust them before the finish. The contestants reached the first major obstacle, a narrow gatehouse followed by a sharp left turn. Several racers failed the maneuver and plunged into the water. Skyke used his position in the middle of the pack to angle perfectly through the turns. Confident that Arel must have fallen behind, he looked back only to find Arel still right beside him. Ahead of them, the race's reigning champion, Dione, accelerated, widening her lead. To her surprise, both Arel and Skyke maintained their positions behind her. Even Dione looked unsettled. First years were never this fast. Skyke began sweating, struggling to maintain her pace. Eventually, he completely ran out of mana and was forced to drop out of the lead group. His effort was acknowledged by the Yellow School professor watching from below, but Arel remained right behind Dione. Impressed, Dione pushed her speed further. Realizing 2 months of training might not be enough to beat her, Arel used his trump card. Jumping off magically created air pockets beneath his feet. The commentator was confused, unable to understand what he was doing. The light magic instructor explained that generating enough lift from those pockets would require extraordinary leg strength, akin to that of a supreme-class swordsman. Arel, of course, had never skipped leg day. Approaching the final stretch, both racers were forced to consider slowing down for the upcoming sharp turn. Dione held on as long as she could, knowing whoever slowed first would lose momentum. Eventually, she eased her speed, but Arel refused to slow down. Instead, he punched an air pocket midair, using the force to sling himself around the corner at full speed. With that, he shot past the finish line in first place. Dione followed soon after and, despite losing, graciously congratulated him. Skyke eventually reached the finish too, collapsing immediately from exhaustion. A short while later, the headmaster awarded Arel his medal and certificate. Arel seized the moment to ask for a promotion to the second grade. The headmaster, impressed by his performance and abilities, granted the request on the spot. With that, Arel completed promotions in the blue, red, and green schools. Only 3 remained.